Have you ever looked around and wondered why so many people are turning toward faith in a world that seems to be turning away from it? Why in the middle of chaos, confusion, and constant change, Islam is quietly growing across the West, one heart, one story at a time? Well, let me take you into that story, not with statistics or headlines, but with the voices, the moments, and the truth behind the transformation. Personal awakening begins in silence. There is a sacred hush beneath the chatter of our daily routines, a pocket of quiet that waits like a soft armchair in the corner of a crowded room. For so many who have found themselves journeying toward Islam in the West, that hush becomes a companion long before the first verse of the Quran is ever opened. Imagine a young woman finishing a late shift, too wired to sleep, sitting in the dim glow of kitchen light with her tea. All evening she has been surrounded by noise, digital pings, fluorescent hum, hurried conversation, yet in this moment the noise stops, and the silence seems to lean in. She feels rather than hears a subtle invitation. Listen, beneath the swirl of the day, there is a steady note that has always been playing. Most of us run past it, but every awakening begins when we decide, finally, to stop running. In that silence, self-talk turns into soul talk. We start to ask questions that scare us a little. What am I doing on this planet? Why does my heart race when the news scroll says disaster? Why does nothing I buy, binge watch, or swipe right on leave me satisfied? These questions, Oprah might say, are the curriculum of the spirit. No professor grades them. Life itself becomes the classroom. When the only voice left is your own, you begin to realize whether that voice has been a friend, an enemy, or simply a stranger you never took time to know. And within that inner dialogue, many seekers bump into a name they had heard only in headlines or passing comments: Islam. Not the Islam of sensational sound bites, but the Islam of surrender, of peaceful submission, of a direct line to the Creator that costs no subscription fee and requires no algorithm. Silence, however, is not an empty vessel. It is fertile ground. Seeds of curiosity fall into it, and roots form quietly in the dark. A podcast interview about mindfulness drifts into a reflection on daily prayer. A friend's Ramadan post, liked almost absent-mindedly, becomes a mental breadcrumb you follow until you notice there is a whole loaf of wisdom waiting on a table you never knew existed. The more space you give to silence, the louder truth seems to speak. You realize that the ache you felt scrolling social feeds was not boredom. It was hunger for meaning, for coherence, for a script larger than the self-curated highlights of personal brand. During these gentle interrogations of the heart, something miraculous unfolds. You discover your own voice blooming into courage. You ask yourself out loud, maybe for the first time, what if the call to prayer is not just a relic of some far-off landscape, but an echo that can live in my life, right here, right now? What if bowing my head could align my entire being, mind, body, and spirit, into one pronouncement: I am not the center of the universe, but I am cherished by the one who is. When you entertain that possibility, the silence thickens, charged with the electricity of destiny. Oprah often says that the universe whispers before it shouts. In the context of spiritual conversion, the whisper appears as a gentle inner nudge. Turn the radio off during your commute and ride in quiet. Skip the usual Netflix scroll tonight and read a paragraph of something sacred. Stand outside at dawn, just to feel how the horizon exhales light. Little by little, these moments stitch themselves together into a private quilt of revelation. No single patch is definitive, but together they warm the soul enough to step into unfamiliar territory. In the hush, you sense that surrender is not defeat, it is release. So you lay down the frantic need to mastermind every outcome, and a new word rises in the mind: Islam, meaning peace through submission. The silence teaches you the art of receptive listening. You begin to catch, like radio signals, stories of other converts, a former corporate strategist who found structure in the rhythm of 5 prayers, a musician whose heartbeat aligned with the cadence of Quranic recitation, a college athlete who discovered real discipline in the fast of Ramadan, rather than the gym. Their journeys do not overwrite yours. They illuminate the path ahead. Each narrative becomes a mirror, reflecting what is possible when a life is reorganized around a divine center. And in that reflection, your own face looks back at you not as a stranger, but as someone finally recognized. Silence is also where resistance surfaces. Doubts flare. What will my family say? Will I be judged for every mispronounced Arabic phrase? Yet inside the quiet, fear has nowhere to hide. It shows up, shrinks under inspection, and dissolves. The stillness reveals faith, not as an escape from intellect, but as its fulfillment. Reason and revelation dance, each affirming the other, and you marvel that harmony was possible all along. This realization rarely arrives with clanging cymbals. It is a soft crescendo, noticeable only because you made room to hear it. Finding belonging in a disconnected world, faith as a response to chaos. The beauty of ritual and meaningful practice. Finding belonging in a disconnected world. We live in a time where connection is everywhere, but community feels more out of reach than ever. We scroll through hundreds of faces every day, double-tapping smiles and sunsets, but when the screen goes dark, a different kind of emptiness sets in. We're hungry for something real, something rooted. Not curated friendships built around convenience or aesthetics, but sacred companionship, people who know your soul, not just your social media. And that ache for genuine belonging is one of the deepest forces drawing people toward Islam in the West. For so many converts, the first encounter with Islam isn't doctrinal or even theological, it's relational. It begins with a small act. Someone is greeted with "Assalamu alaikum," and even if they don't yet know the Arabic, the warmth translates, "Peace be upon you." You don't need to be anything but a human being to deserve that blessing. There's power in being seen that way, not as a consumer, not as a profile picture, not as a problem to fix, but as a soul-carrying light. In many Western societies, the rhythm of life often pulls people apart. We live in silos, age groups, interest groups, socioeconomic levels, algorithms that feed us what we already believe. The family dinner table becomes fragmented, if it exists at all. Places of collective reflection are replaced with commercial spaces. Even in spiritual circles, the feeling of being alone with your questions, your past or your pain can be overwhelming. But in the Muslim community, especially in the lives of those newly embracing Islam, many describe walking into a mosque or a prayer circle and feeling something ancient and familiar, a deep sigh of relief that says, "I'm not alone anymore." It's not about perfection, it's about proximity. In Islam, the Friday prayer isn't optional community, it's required connection. You stand shoulder to shoulder, not next to someone who looks like you or votes like you, but someone who, like you, bows to something greater than both of you. That weekly gathering becomes a ritual reminder. No matter how fractured the outer world becomes, there is still a space where everyone is leveled by faith. For many converts, this is the first time they've experienced not just inclusion, but embrace. And in that embrace, healing begins. One woman once said she converted not because she read the Quran, but because a Muslim neighbor brought her food during a hard time without asking for anything in return. She said, "I saw Islam before I understood it." That's what belonging looks like, not a list of requirements but a lived compassion. A brotherhood, a sisterhood, where your worth isn't measured by status but by sincerity. You see this belonging during Ramadan, when converts are invited into homes they've never been to, sharing dates and prayer mats, and laughter with strangers who quickly become family. You see it when someone struggles with pronunciation during a prayer, and the community gently encourages rather than corrects with condescension. You feel it when someone is grieving, and they're surrounded by people they didn't even know they had. Hands on backs, casseroles on doorsteps, prayers rising on their behalf. This is more than hospitality, it's a spiritual ethic. In Islam, the ummah, or global community, is not a metaphor, it's a reality, deeply embedded in the way people live and serve each other. And for someone who has felt like an outsider for most of their life, maybe due to race, upbringing, or belief systems, that sense of being folded into a sacred tapestry is life-changing. There's a moment for many new Muslims when they realize they are being prayed for by people who barely know them, in countries they've never been to. That kind of love transcends borders and backgrounds. It begins to stitch the soul back together. And what's remarkable is how this belonging doesn't erase individuality, it honors it. A convert from a small town in the Midwest may stand beside a refugee from Syria or a grandmother from Nigeria, and the differences don't become threats, they become threads in a richer fabric. Because Islam doesn't ask you to assimilate into someone else's identity. It invites you to deepen your own, while anchoring it in divine connection and shared purpose. In a world where so many are searching for a tribe, a safe place to exhale, Islam is offering not just community, but communion, a space where you can be your full self, on a path with others, all walking home to the same source. Faith as a response to chaos. The beauty of ritual and meaningful practice transforming identity, not erasing it when the world feels like it's spinning faster than you can keep up. When every headline tightens your chest, when it feels like the ground beneath you might give way, what do you reach for? In times like these, we don't look for noise, we look for clarity. We don't crave more choices, we crave certainty. And for many in the West, Islam becomes a profound answer to that very human need, a steady hand in the storm, a still point in the middle of chaos. Modern life is designed for acceleration. Everything is on demand, information, food, entertainment, even relationships. But the faster we move, the less grounded we feel. There's a quiet kind of panic that lives in the heart of this speed. The sense that if you stop for even a second, everything will fall apart. Yet it's in that pause, in that breath, that a deeper question rises. Is this pace making me more alive, or is it slowly unraveling me? That question alone is a crack in the surface, and through it light starts to come in. That's where the turn toward faith often begins, not as a rejection of the world, but as a search for peace within it. For so many converts to Islam, the appeal isn't just theological, it's structural. In a world that constantly tells you to do what you feel, to chase what you want, Islam offers discipline, not as punishment, but as protection. The daily prayers become an anchor, a reminder 5 times a day that you are more than your tasks, your titles, your timeline. They interrupt the chaos with presence. You might be in a boardroom, a classroom, a subway station, but when the call to prayer reaches your ears, whether real or internal, you are gently pulled back to something eternal. It's not an escape, it's a centering. When everything outside is unpredictable, people begin to long for something unchanging. In Islam, that unchanging presence is God, Allah. Not a distant concept, but a nearness you can call upon with every breath. In the Quran, God describes himself as closer than your jugular vein. And for someone living in a world that often feels cold and transactional, that intimacy with the divine is not just comforting, it's revolutionary. It offers a different rhythm, one not governed by scarcity or fear, but by surrender. It's not that the chaos disappears. Life still delivers its share of heartbreak, injustice and noise, but faith transforms your position within it. Instead of being swept away by anxiety or despair, the believer stands firm, not because they have all the answers, but because they trust in the one who does. That kind of trust isn't naive, it's cultivated, it's shaped in the quiet moments after prayer, in the reflection on sacred verses, in the act of fasting when everything in you wants to reach for relief. Each of these practices strengthens spiritual muscles, muscles that carry you through life's turbulence, with a deeper kind of strength. There's also a psychological alignment that happens. Islam doesn't ask you to suppress your emotions, but it teaches you how to guide them. Anger is not ignored, it's acknowledged and then controlled. Grief is not rushed through, it's honored, while knowing that with hardship comes ease. The practices aren't just rituals, they're recalibrations. They pull your gaze away from the temporary and lift it to the eternal. In a world that changes every hour, that kind of consistency is a form of healing. And there's something else, something profound. In times of societal unrest, racial injustice, economic instability, many converts see in Islam a system that speaks not just to the soul, but to the structure of life. It calls for fairness in trade, dignity in labor, care for the orphan, protection for the vulnerable. It doesn't just offer peace of mind, it offers a vision for a just world. That vision resonates deeply with those who are not just spiritually hungry, but morally alert. When everything else seems to crumble, Islam provides a framework, both personal and collective, for how to live with purpose, with compassion, and with resilience. In the swirl of uncertainty, faith becomes a compass. And for many, Islam is not just a belief system, it's a divine orientation, a way to move through the chaos without losing themselves in it. The beauty of ritual and meaningful practice. There is something quietly powerful about repetition. The way a mother hums the same lullaby every night to her child. The way the sun rises at the same hour and sets with unshakable loyalty. We're built to crave rhythm, to anchor ourselves in something steady. And yet, in much of modern Western life, rituals have become hollow or forgotten altogether. Birthdays are thrown together for social media photos. Holidays are often stripped of their sacred meaning. And people deep down are left wondering, what is all this for? For many who find themselves drawn to Islam, it is this longing for rooted, purposeful ritual that begins to shift everything. Islam is a religion woven through with intentional practice. Nothing is random. Nothing is wasted. From how you begin your morning to how you lay your head down at night, there is a sacred rhythm available to those who want to live in tune with something greater. The 5 daily prayers, or salat, are not merely scheduled duties. They are moments of divine intimacy. You pause, you wash, you turn toward Mecca, and you speak directly to your Creator. For someone who has spent years feeling lost in the crowd, adrift in digital noise, that simple physical act of placing your forehead to the ground in humility can feel like coming home. And that's what ritual does. It brings you home to yourself and to your purpose. Converts often describe how disjointed their lives felt before Islam. Not necessarily broken, but disconnected. Mind racing in one direction, body going through the motions, heart not sure where it belonged. Islam doesn't just offer a set of beliefs. It gives you a structure to live those beliefs every single day. It turns ordinary acts into worship. Eating becomes gratitude. Working becomes service. Sleeping becomes trust. It's not that you escape the world. It's that you start living in it with your eyes, your heart, your soul wide open. There's a kind of healing that happens through ritual. Take fasting, for example. During Ramadan, you refrain from food and drink from dawn until sunset, not as punishment, but as purification. And what many find is that in giving up those external things, they begin to gain something internal. Clarity, compassion, control. You realize how much you consume without thinking. How often you chase comfort instead of character. Through the fast, your body becomes a vessel of awareness. Your spirit begins to stretch. And at the end of each day, when you break your fast with a date and a sip of water, it's not just hunger that's satisfied, it's your soul. Even the call to prayer itself, the adhan, becomes a daily reminder that there is more to this life than deadlines and distractions. It's a beautiful interruption, a melody that cuts through the chaos. For many converts, hearing it for the first time feels like a memory they forgot they had. It awakens something ancient inside, a recognition that this connection was what they were always made for. And the beauty of it all is that these rituals are not just for the elite, or the educated, or those born into the faith. They are for anyone willing to surrender and show up. You don't have to understand everything on day one. You just begin, with your hands raised in prayer, with your heart open to change, with your body slowly learning the motions, not for performance, but for alignment. In a culture that often reduces spirituality to vague affirmations or detached meditation, Islam grounds the spiritual in the physical. You don't just think about God, you remember Him with your tongue. You don't just reflect on gratitude, you show it through charity. You don't just seek peace, you create it with every act of worship. Ritual in this way becomes not a burden, but a bridge. It connects your fleeting moments to something timeless. It transforms your life from a scattered timeline of events into a woven tapestry of intention. The beauty of these practices is not only in their consistency, but in their capacity to shape you. You begin to see life differently. The sunrise becomes a sign. The breath between words becomes a blessing. The pause before breaking your fast becomes a prayer. And slowly, gently, the sacred becomes your new normal. In a world that constantly asks you to conform, to edit yourself into something palatable, to shrink your story to fit into the mainstream, there's something radical about a path that doesn't ask you to erase who you are, but instead invites you to expand into your fullest self. That's the experience many converts describe when they come into Islam in the West. Not a rejection of their past, but a reorientation of their future. Not a trade-in of their identity, but a transformation of it. In the truest sense, they are not becoming someone else. They are becoming more of who they were always meant to be. We are all shaped by layers: culture, family, memory, struggle, joy. Those layers don't just disappear when someone embraces Islam. But what changes is the compass. The center shifts. Suddenly all those layers get rearranged around a deeper axis: submission to God, a sense of divine purpose, a truth that is bigger than the self, but not distant from it. Islam doesn't flatten you into uniformity. It refines you, like fire to gold. And in that refining, you begin to realize that your story was never outside of the divine plan. Every chapter, even the painful ones, prepared you for the clarity you now walk in. Many converts come with wounds from rejection, from spiritual confusion, from systems that told them they weren't enough unless they performed, achieved, or assimilated. And when they step into Islam, there's this moment of dissonance that happens. They wonder, can I really be both? Can I love my culture and still follow this path? Can I keep my art, my language, my style, and still be a sincere Muslim? What they find over time is that Islam doesn't ask for erasure, it asks for elevation. You don't stop being Black or Latina, or Irish or Filipino, when you convert. You start embodying those identities with intention. You begin to see them as vehicles of mercy, not barriers to belonging. There is a divine wisdom in the diversity of the Muslim world. A convert in Canada can wear a hijab and still cook the recipes her grandmother taught her. A new Muslim in France might recite Quran with an accent, but every syllable is heard by God. A brother in Detroit might pray in Arabic, but still speak with the cadence of his neighborhood. These are not contradictions, they are harmonies. Islam dignifies your origins and gives them a new language, a spiritual language that runs beneath the surface of everything you do. And with that spiritual language comes a transformation that is quiet but undeniable. You begin to walk differently, not because someone told you to change, but because your sense of self has deepened. You move through the world with more purpose. You speak with more care. You reflect more before reacting. And while others may not immediately understand the shift, you begin to feel a peace that is no longer dependent on external validation. That peace becomes your signature. It is visible in your gaze, your choices, your silence, your prayers. Identity, after all, is not just about who you were born as, it's about who you choose to become. And for many who enter Islam, that choice is an act of profound self-respect. It is saying, I will not let this world define me by trends, traumas, or expectations. I will define myself by the one who created me. That kind of liberation is rarely celebrated in the mainstream, but it is transformative. It allows people to hold their past with compassion and step into their future with conviction. There are struggles, of course. There are moments when family members don't understand, when friends pull away, when the weight of visibility becomes hard to carry. But in those moments, Islam provides not just comfort, but clarity. You are not alone. You are part of a legacy that spans continents and centuries. You are walking a path that prophets walked, that scholars walked, that poets and revolutionaries and mothers and orphans walked. And the beauty of that path is that it makes space for you, not by erasing who you were, but by illuminating who you can become, through faith, devotion, and divine love. When I speak to myself this way, softly, truthfully, without apology, I begin to understand why so many are drawn to Islam in the West. Not because it asks them to abandon who they are, but because it shows them who they've always been beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the ache of disconnection. Islam is not just growing through numbers, it's growing through transformation, through the way it answers questions that modern life has left hanging, through the way it gathers those who've been wandering, through the way it turns chaos into clarity, loneliness into community, routine into ritual, identity into divine purpose. This journey, this homecoming, is deeply personal, and yet profoundly shared. You see it in a young woman
who finds strength in covering what the world taught her to exploit. You hear it in the voice of a man who now prays with the same hands that once reached blindly for direction. You feel it in the quiet steadiness of someone who doesn't just believe in God, but lives like God is with them in every moment. Conversions are not trends, they are testimonies. They are the soul's response to a truth that resonates deeper than language or geography. And communities aren't built on sameness, they are built on sacred purpose. That is why Islam is expanding, not by force, not through spectacle, but through presence, through kindness, through clarity, through the unshakable peace that so many have been searching for, and are finally beginning to find.